he just turned around a lot. Inside my new little home, I had nothing to do, no books to read, no window to look out, no TV, telephone, didn't have a pencil or a piece of paper. For 2,103 days. And there's not a veteran in this room that hasn't considered what it might be like to be a prisoner of war. But you'll learn a lot in a prison cell. You learn a lot about pain. You establish plateaus of pain. But more than that, after just a few miles, you learn that this 8 feet is not really the restriction. That the restriction in a prison cell or any other adversity in life turns out to be the 8 inches between your ears. You're in this mental box. Ever been in one of those mental boxes? We all get there. I'm convinced the mental boxes of our lives can be more restrictive than those walls of stone and steel that I was behind. But I don't mind telling you this. It didn't take me very many miles. I was going crazy. I decided, Charlie, if you're going to survive this, you're going to have to come up with something to do. Make a little game to play. Keep your mind active. I thought, that's what I'll do. I'll make a little deck of cards. And I did. I constructed a little deck of playing cards about the size of postage stamps. I tore these cards from 52 little strips of toilet paper. And I can tell you this with authority. Toilet paper is tough to shuffle. You don't lick your fingers very much shuffling toilet paper. Okay, before we get back into the prison scene and my walk of 3 steps by 3 steps, let me tell you what pride it is for me to be here in this museum and to celebrate my brothers and sisters, the veterans from Vietnam. I think I had a chance to shake every hand of the 30-some-odd guys and gals that were up here, and I appreciate you. But there's one other group I'd like to appreciate, and that is the wives, families, mothers that have supported us, the veterans, because it was tough. So would the ladies please stand up, and guys too. If you support a veteran, would you please stand up? Margie, thanks for taking care of the general. So we've gathered here, and for the first time, for many of you, you had a band play when you came home. And it was a great feeling to finally be thanked for the service that we rendered in Vietnam, because it didn't happen very often, as many of you remember. But what does it take? What does it take to put a museum like this together? What does it take to honor the veterans and the families of the veterans? I think you have to be a parachute packer. Let me explain that. Several years after I came home from Vietnam, I was in a restaurant in Kansas City where I used to live. About 2 tables over, a guy kept looking at me, and I caught his eye, but I didn't recognize this gent. He stood up. This fellow walked over to my table. He pointed at me with kind of a stern look on his face. He said, "You're Captain Plumb." I looked up and I said, "Yes, sir, I'm Captain Plumb." "You're that guy? You flew jet fighters in Vietnam. You're a fighter pilot. Part of that Top Gun outfit. You were shot down off the aircraft carrier Kitty Hawk. You parachuted in enemy hands. You were tortured. You were in prison for nearly 6 years." I was dumbfounded. I looked up at this guy and I said, "How in the world did you know all that?" He finally broke into a smile and he said, "Because I'm the guy that packed your parachute." Tell you this, for this guy that runs around the country making speeches, suddenly I was speechless. Best I could do was stagger to my feet, reach out a very grateful hand of thanks. He came up with just the proper words. The guy grabbed my hand, he pumped my arm, and he said, "I guess it worked." I said, "Yes, sir, it did. Indeed, it did. And I must tell you, I wouldn't be alive today. And I've said a lot of prayers for your nimble fingers, but I had no idea I'd ever have the opportunity of expressing my gratitude in person. Thanks. He said, were all the panels there? I said, I appreciate your concern. I must be honest with you, they weren't. Of the 18 panels I was supposed to have in that parachute, I had only 15 good ones. 3 of the panels were torn, but it wasn't your fault, it was mine. I ejected from that F-4 Phantom jet at 600 knots close to the ground. I was well outside the envelope of that parachute. I didn't do my job, you did yours. But let me ask you a question. Do you keep track of all the parachutes you pack? Do you know of all the lives you've saved? The guy said, no. Now this is the most important part of the conversation. He said, no, I don't keep track of all the parachutes I pack. It's enough gratification for me just to know that I've served. Here's a sailor, a parachute rigger, well below the waterline of this aircraft carrier. He stands there at a long wooden table and he weaves the shrouds and folds the silk panels of these parachutes, passes them along one after another, doing his job 10, 12, 14 hours a day, while the jet jockey, while the Top Gun zooms around the sky at the speed of sound, couldn't have cared less about the guy down there in the hole. Until one day my parachute came along when he packed mine up for me. Question becomes, who packs your parachute? Who prepares you for those challenges of life? And maybe more importantly, who depends on you for packing their parachute? So I think we have a room full of parachute packers here. Obviously the veterans, maybe as important or more important, the people who support the veterans, the people that put this museum together. Wonderful people that serve without asking anything in return. They're packing parachutes just to tell our story, just to affect the people, the civilians of the United States, to tell them what happens when you're in the military and when you're in a combat situation. So I congratulate each of you for being a parachute packer. I was raised with a lot of parachute packers. Mom, dad, big sister, 2 little brothers. Coaches, preachers, teachers brought me through grade school and high school. At the Naval Academy, had great parachute packers there. Had officers and chaplains and midshipmen and the superintendent who told us we could do anything we set our minds to do, and we did. I graduated from Annapolis, married my high school sweetheart under the Arch of Swords. My buddies were holding up their swords. It was a beautiful day. Flight training, Pensacola, Florida, Beeville, Texas, Meridian, Mississippi, where John McCain was my flight instructor. Out to San Diego, California, where I flew the first adversarial flights for the Top Gun school. Launched on the aircraft carrier Kitty Hawk. You saw the video. I stood on the flight deck, and I picked my wife out of the crowd, and I waved to her. It was her birthday. I waved to her, and I promised her I'd be back in 8 months. Almost made it. Almost made it. As the general told you, I was 5 days from the end of my tour. 74 successful combat missions, over 100 carrier landings, and 5 days to go. My co-pilot and I, my RIO in my back seat, and I were on a target just south of Hanoi. Hit by a surface-to-air missile. The fuel on that airplane, probably 12,000, 15,000 pounds of jet fuel, exploded. Sent that bird topsy-turvy, end over end. I ejected, he ejected, our parachutes opened, and we began a 90-second descent from king of the skies to scum of the earth. Captured immediately, halted in the Hanoi Hilton is what we called it, a prison camp there. Tortured for 2 days for military information and political propaganda, and tossed into that little cell. I wasn't kidding you an inch. Let me tell you my physical state, those first few months I was in a prison camp. Bleeding from 4 open wounds, no medical care, boils all over my body. I was getting really skinny, really hungry, really thirsty, feeling sorry for myself. That was my physical state. My mental state was even worse. I had given up. I had surrendered. Fighter pilots are not supposed to surrender. That's not in the Top Gun playbook. And you know, I felt very guilty about that. How can I ever go back to my country? How can I ever face my fellow fighter pilots and admit that I'd failed in my mission so miserably? Maybe I won't go back. Maybe if this war ever ends, I'll go to some foreign country and change my name, because I don't want anybody to know how weak I was. And it was with that mindset I heard in the far corner the chirping noise of a cricket. Went over to check it out. Found there no cricket at all, but a piece of wire about that long, poked through a hole at the base of the cell wall and scratching on my concrete floor, making this chirping noise. I'm watching the little wire bobbing in and out of that rat hole. I'm thinking to myself, the enemy is not sophisticated enough to try to trick me, so it must be another American on the other end of that wire trying to communicate with me. And boy, would I like to talk to another American. And it's probably a fighter pilot, since that's who's in these prison camps. This is an air war over North Vietnam. Pilots are being shot down. We got I knew it was a whole prison camp full of pilots. An air cruise. And I'd sure like to talk to another pilot, but I bet that guy's tougher than I am. I bet he's older, more mature, probably a better pilot, and he probably didn't cry for mercy when he surrendered like I did. I'm losing interest now. I don't think I want to expose my tenderness to anybody else, and if I can just crawl over here in the corner of this prison cell and wait, surely in a few years the Marines will break down the gates and I'll be set free. I'll never have to take another risk the rest of my life. And the wire kept scratching, and I kept sweating. And I finally, after hours, I finally got up the guts to reach down and grab that wire and tug. And the wire tugged back. I tugged again, and the wire disappeared right back through that rat hole. It came back about an hour later. This time the wire had a note wrapped around the end of it. The note was written on a dirty piece of toilet paper. I could barely make it out, but it was in English. It said, "Memorize this code, then eat this note." I did it. I memorized the code. The code was a 5x5 box of the alphabet. 5 lines, 5 rows. A, B, C, D, E across the top, F, G, H, I, J. Numbers down the side, across the top, indicating any letter would be represented by 2 numbers. Number of the line, then the number of the row. Got it? A, first line, first row. 1 tug, 1 more tug. Z, 5th line, 5th. You think your email is cumbersome. You try this. But it worked. This silly, archaic, cumbersome code became our language. More than that, it became our lifeblood. It was absolutely vital. I mean, life and death vital that we communicate with the other guys in that prison camp. To the point that if a guy was put in the far corner of the prison camp and couldn't or wouldn't communicate with the rest of us, he probably wasn't going to make it. That support group that we had there was instrumental in our survival. So I started to communicate. On the other end of the wire, Lieutenant Commander Bob Shoemaker. He'd been there 2 years when I was shot down, total of over 8 years in a prison camp. He's a 2-star admiral today. Shoemaker said, "How you doing, buddy?" I said, "I'm doing terrible, buddy." I said, "My president sent me over here. It's his dirty Vietnam War. It's all political. We know that. But it's not my fault. I'm the victim of circumstances beyond my control." He said, "You got a big problem." I said, "What's my problem?" "You will find in this prison camp that if you blame everybody else for the challenges of your life, you give away control of your life." Wow. He said, "You will find that you've just joined the best team you'll ever play on, bar none. You will find the leadership, the American leadership in this prison camp is the best you will ever see, forever. Our leaders can't see us. They can't talk to us. They can't promote us. They can't fire us. They can't give us a day off. But it's the best you will ever see. Our leaders have come up with one single motto. It's 3 words, and it's really easy. Here it is. Return with honor. Every decision you make, you need to run that through this prism. Return with honor. Okay, think I've got that. Well, he sure packed my parachute that day. Don't think I'd be alive today if it hadn't been for Bob Shoemaker, who brought me into that fold. How vital it was to be connected with the other guys in that prison camp. And so we spent hours and hours on that wire and tapping on walls with this silly code, this 5x5 matrix of the alphabet. We set up situations where if you got outside and were chopping wood or sweeping or any other noise that you could make, you would chop in that code. Chop, 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 chop. Chop, 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 chop. We called it a radio station because everybody could hear. And if a new guy came into the camp, and because we didn't know who the president was. We didn't know who won the World Series. And a new guy would be shot down, and a very popular guy. We'd get him on the radio station, and he would tell us all. But the importance of the communication wasn't really the information we were passing around. It wasn't the top secret escape plans. The vital purpose of communication in a prison camp and in daily life was the simple validation of another human being. Because in those prison cells, and I was in a lot of them, if it was dark and you were alone in solitary confinement, some guys were in solitary for 4.5 years, you'd lose track. You wouldn't know what was a real memory, what's a hallucination. You need a baseline. You need to validate your own sanity. Sometimes you even wondered if you were alive or dead. The simple tugging on a wire, to have that wire tugged back, meant two things. Number one, somebody's responding to something I am doing physically, thus I exist. I am alive. Number two, somebody cares about me. In this day and age, you and I would probably argue the greatest achievement of all times. We can now pass a packet of data from one handheld machine around the world to another handheld machine. I'm still here to suggest to you that the very essence of life, the very essence of service, is validating other people. It's the old adage, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So we had a lot of parachute packers in that prison camp, and our leadership was, in fact, the best you'll ever see. But the leadership came from some interesting places. In fact, maybe the best parachute packer in the place was an enlisted guy. We were all officers. We were college graduates. Who shows up? A Navy sailor, Seaman Douglas Hegdahl. How did a sailor get into a prison camp in an air war over North Vietnam? Well, he fell off his ship. He used to tell us, I wasn't captured. I was rescued. Seaman Douglas Hegdahl from Clark, South Dakota, was on the cruiser Canberra in the middle of the night. Ship was doing some inshore fire support. He fell off. But could he take a joke? We would have these contests just for something to do. We would tug on our wires and tap on walls and pass around a little questionnaire, just to while away the time. Who's the oldest in the prison camp? Who's got the most kids back home? Who's been here the longest? One time we had what we call the high fast, low slow contest to try to determine what fighter pilot had jumped out of his jet going highest and fastest and who jumped out going lowest and slowest. Well, high fast contest was won by some Air Force jock who punched out of an F-105 at 52,000 feet, 1,000 miles an hour. And the low-slow contest was won by the Navy sailor. 12 feet at 15 knots. He won. But here's the interesting part, and why I take your valuable time to tell you his story. This lowly sailor, this insignificant entry-level, minimum wage, new hire, part-timer, didn't seem to suffer from this 8-inch box the way the more mature of us college graduates did. I don't know why. Sometimes I think he just wasn't mature enough to understand the problem. For whatever reason, he didn't blame everybody else for his problems and feel sorry for himself. He didn't get into this pity party, this bushel of pity upon himself. What did he do? What all good sailors do. He set to work. He got into action. He made something happen. He kicked down what was left of his comfort zone, got further outside it, and started tugging on wires and tapping on walls. He began by memorizing all of our names. In that camp, 254 men. He put our names into songs. He would sing these songs over and over and over, but he wasn't nearly finished. Went back through the list. He memorized our hometowns across the country. He memorized our next of kin. Finally, the sailor memorized the telephone numbers of each of the relatives of each of the prisoners. Unbelievable. That took nearly 2 years. About that time, things were looking up. Improvement in the prison camp. They stopped the torture for the most part. We didn't know why. When we came home, we found out that our wives were back here selling bracelets. Remember the silver bracelets? Anybody wear those bracelets? Sure. With our names on the bracelets. They sold these bracelets for $5 a piece, and that supported their trips to various foreign countries. They went to the Paris peace talks and put pressure on other nations and our government to put pressure on the North Vietnamese. Stop torturing my husband. And it worked. The North Vietnamese seemed to understand that we were important people. They better keep us alive. And so the torture stopped. In fact, they decided to send some guys home early before the end of the war. The first guy they went to was John McCain. Of course, his father was the admiral, and he was a grandson of an admiral. They called him the Crown Prince. But it didn't go easy on him. He had 7 broken bones when he was shot down. And they were twisting his broken bones to torture the poor guy. So they went to John. And McCain, we're sending you home early before the end of the war. John said, in your dreams, I would never give up on my buddies that need American medical aid. I would never leave my team here and go home first. I would never embarrass my father by doing that. You take your idea and shove it. And he got into a lot of trouble because he refused to go home. So they're still looking for somebody to send home on their political play. And our senior man sent a message to the sailor. Son, I want you to go home first. Hegdal sent back, sir, with all due respect, I would rather stay here with the team. I want to march home with you guys. I want to be a part of the solution here. Our senior man sent back, that's not an option. Here's a direct order. Sailor, shove off. Sailor said, aye, sir. Home he came. Now write the script on the sailor. What would you expect of this guy? 2 years in prison by accident. He's been starved, humiliated, lonely, tortured, hadn't seen a woman in 2 years. Suddenly he has 2 years back pay in his pocket. He's set free, and he's on the streets of San Diego. Oh, did I tell you he was a parachute packer? Huh. What do you suppose this sailor did? Sure, he started to travel. The kid went west coast to east. He went north to south. He went through each one of the hometowns he'd memorized. He dialed each one of those telephone numbers he'd memorized. He spoke to each one of the wives he'd memorized, told her that her husband was alive. We have these reunions. In fact, we got a big one coming up, our 50th year anniversary. And we've done pretty well, the POWs, from 591 men, and we have produced 17 generals and 7 admirals. Most of us retired as senior grade military officers. We have doctors and lawyers and preachers and teachers from our number. We're setting records. We have a bunch of congressmen, 2 United States senators, a vice presidential candidate. We have a presidential candidate from our number of 591 guys. And so the generals march in, and the admirals march in, and the senators march in, and the guy that gets a standing ovation is Seaman Doug Hegdal. He showed us all a little bit about leadership. So I wondered for years how we'd be going home, you know? I mean, it was at the top of our minds was, and how would we find out, and how would we respond? I mean, you're in prison for 5, 6, 7, 8.5 years, as Ev Alvarez. What happens when they tell you you're going home? Would you cry? Would you cheer? Would you hug and kiss everybody around you? A bunch of crusty old guys? It finally happened. The war ended. We traded prisoners, 10,000 of them for 591 of us. And we got on a bus. And over the dike, and from the top of the dike, we could see the runway, the enemy's runway. On the end of the enemy's runway, a C-141 cargo jet ready to wing us away to freedom. Flag on the tail, star on the side, lump in my throat. But no response. Nobody cried. Nobody cheered. Nobody hugged and kissed anybody else. I kept waiting and wondering, when are we going to realize this is for real? We got off the bus and went through the process of trading prisoners and still no response. Do you know it wasn't until we finally got aboard that airplane? It wasn't until we rolled down the runway. It wasn't really till we finally lifted off enemy soil. We all broke loose and started hugging and kissing the Air Force nurses. 90 minutes later, I put these feet on free soil, Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines. Down the ladder and across the tarmac to the first telephone I could find to call. Remember her? Yeah, I'd been thinking about her a lot. I had that first conversation totally memorized. I knew exactly what I was going to say to her. But she was gone. I called my parents back in Kansas. What's happened to my wife? My father couldn't talk to me. He was so broken up. My mother finally said, son, I'd give 10 years of my life if I didn't have to tell you this. And I'm sure she would have. Your wife hung on for 5 years, then just 3 months ago, she filed for divorce. She's engaged to another guy. Whew, what a gut punch that was. I laid in the hospital bed in Chicago at Great Lakes Naval Hospital. I'm curled up in a fetal position, feeling sorry for myself and blaming everybody I can think of. And then suddenly it occurred to me, wait a minute, did you learn nothing in that 8-foot by 8-foot classroom? Don't you realize that it's not what's around you that's going to make a difference? It's the way you respond to what's around you. And you've been through challenges before, and you're going to pick up this, and you're going to pull up your bootstraps and get on with your life. And I did. And the other guys did too. And it's been a great experience, actually, in the last 50 years, traveling around and telling my story. Telling your story, the veterans. And I get a lot of people, in and out and thanking for me for my service. And I want to transfer that to you because each of you has your story as well. And the families of the veterans here and the supporters of the veterans and the people that volunteer in this museum. You're the parachute packers as well, and I appreciate you. But we've done pretty well. The POWs, I've remarried, I have 4 kids and 4 grandkids, live a very happy life. Ran a marathon a few years ago in Alaska. It's called the Midnight Sun Run. It's a marathon, the Midnight Sun, it's the Saturday closest to the longest day of the year. I chose that marathon because I figure it might need 24 hours of daylight to run 26 miles. Took 2 of my kids up there with me. Joe and Evie went with me to the marathon. They wanted nothing to do with the race. They just wanted a vacation in Alaska, and that was okay. Night before the race, okay, I'm in the hotel with my kids. This is your dad's craziness, and I know that you don't have any interest in this race, and it's tomorrow morning early. I don't even know where it is, but don't worry. Sleep in, take it easy, have a leisurely breakfast, and I'll be back tomorrow afternoon. We'll go see a glacier or something. Oh, it was a hot day for Anchorage. I hadn't prepared for the heat. And I'm about halfway around this marathon, and I'm sweating like crazy, just barely putting a foot in front of the other. And I'm thinking to myself, the most beautiful sight in the world is going to be that finish sign, but it wasn't. It was under the finish sign. Here's Joe, Evie, 2 of my kids cheering on the old man. When I finally caught my breath, I went to my kids, and I said, you just don't know how much it means to your father to have you here, but how did you find the finish line? Well, Dad, we shared a cab with a couple of guys from the hotel. They knew where it was. I said, how did they know where it was? Well, Dad, they ran the race. They came back to the hotel. They had breakfast. I said I ran the race. I didn't win the race. What's my message? It's your message. It's the veteran's message. It's a message of service. It's a message of giving. It's a message of parachute packing. It's a message that adversity is a horrible thing to waste. So the challenge is this, veterans, tell your stories. I know that a civilian can't understand what we've been through. We tell our stories to each other because we understand each other. But tell your stories anyway. It's good for them. It's good for you. And I hope you'll go do that. Supporters of veterans, don't give up. Don't give up on us. We know you won't. So, awfully good to be with you. Congratulations for all that you do. Happy to be part of this celebration. God bless every one of you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Presents. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, you know, when a sailor does a really great job, then a superior awards him with a coin. And this is the National Veterans Memorial Museum Challenge coin. And one of the really cool things about all of this, take your seats, thank you, is everything that you see in this museum, my staff, our team, and our friends have created. And so, as the founding CEO, I said to Candace Brady, hey, we need to send a thank you note. And she said, okay, sir, I'm going to go invent stationery because we don't have any. We don't have any envelopes. We don't have any. So our team created a coin, and it's delivered this way, as you well know.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's beautiful. That is a beautiful coin. Wow.
We created a veteranpreneur store, and I invite you after a break up here to go through the store. Justin Locke, who's a paratrooper, Sergeant First Class in Army Reserve, still jumping these days. When he joined our team, he said, give me something to do. And I said, okay, invent a store and then invent an online presence. And I think we have 48 veteran-owned businesses in the store. So when you purchase there, you are giving a hand to a veteran as well. And here's some of the bling there. The book. Yep. Now, at the bottom of the stairs, look at this guy. You'll see on the wall the last part of an exhibit that we had here called the 20-Year War. And the backstory was in March of 2001, or March of 2021, two Rangers and a photojournalist came to us and said, we want to create a book. We want to create the 20-Year War book. And we're going to go around the country and we're going to interview veterans, 71 it turned out to be. And then we're going to make this book. And then on September 11th, 2021, we're going to open the book, do a book signing at the National Veterans Memorial Museum. So in just a number of months, we're going to go around the country, create a book, and then we'll be back. And of course, we said, yeah, Ranger, go ahead and knock yourself out. We'll be standing by, we're ready, and they did it. And then the talent of our team here looked at within the book and said, this is really amazing and compelling. So let's select 21 of those and create an exhibit. So Megan McGowan, Andy Cloyd, Suzanne Stone, and many others on the team created it, the first exhibit that the NVMM ever created. And downstairs now we have Identity, which is from Nashville, and it's about art and music and the like. So it's so cool to watch these young men and women thrive to help tell the story, as you just said. Now, I don't think we have it right in front of me right now, but later, a friend of mine sent me a newspaper, and it was the announcement of the repatriation of our POWs. And my friend's a naval aviator. So we often do say we need more diversity at the NVMM, so we get Navy guys. But Roger Huff, Navy aviator, provided it to me. So I all these 591 names. And I said, well, is Tom Moe in there? And sure enough. And is Charlie Plumb in there? Sure enough. So you're going to get the paper before you get out of here. One more time, big round of applause for an inspired leader.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, Charlie. It was outstanding. Now I would like to invite Tom Wyke up to the stage to share a letter from our Senator Sherrod Brown. Tom?
Thank you. Dear friends, as we recognize National Vietnam War Veterans Day and reflect on the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War and repatriation of our prisoners of war, I extend my sincere gratitude to you all who served our country during the war. Vietnam veterans were not always welcomed home or given thanks they deserved. I would like to say welcome home. Thank you for your service, and thank you to your families who sacrificed alongside you, not often receiving the recognition they deserved. You have given so much to our country, and we owe you more than our gratitude. You also deserve the health care, benefits, and education opportunities that you've earned through your service to our nation. That's why I worked to pass the Heath Robinson Honoring Our Pact Act, to finally ensure that all veterans who were exposed to Agent Orange and other toxins during their military service receive the benefits they deserved. I encourage every veteran, even if you're not experiencing symptoms, and surviving spouses to review the va.gov/PACT website and sign up for benefits at your local county veteran service office. I'm honored to be the longest serving Ohioan on the Senate Veteran Affairs Committee, and I take that duty very seriously. We have a team of caseworkers dedicated to helping service members and veterans, and it's one of my most important jobs as your senator. I encourage you to be in touch with my office if you need assistance. On behalf of a grateful state, thank you for all you have done to preserve and protect our country and the values we hold dear. Sincerely, U.S. Senator Sherrod Brown.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Tom. The Ohio Senate has issued a proclamation in honor of today, and we are very privileged to have two of our senators to present that proclamation. Please welcome Herschel Craig and Steve Wilson. Gentlemen.
The book of Micah lifts this query. It raises this interrogative: what does the Lord require of thee? The word comes back to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly before the Lord. I sit there today, and certainly to my colleague, Senator Wilson, today when I heard the words and observed the words of Captain Plumb. Oftentimes, General Ferrier, words that seem so inadequate. I got emotional because I can remember in 1966 at Columbus East High School when Harry Bass left East High School, joined the Marine Corps, and was killed 6 months later. For all of those, and for those of us that did serve, for those that did not serve, our families, today is so emotional for so many reasons. And what an honor and a privilege it is to stand here today on behalf of all of those, many of which did not make it back, and to really honor them appropriately as we stand here today. So we do have, this is really just parchment, but from the 135th General Assembly of the Senate, we're going to read this resolution. It says, as a member or as members of the Senate and the 135th General Assembly of Ohio, I am pleased to pay tribute to the Welcome Home ceremony for the National Vietnam Veterans Day on the occasion of its 3rd anniversary. This annual celebration is a time to honor our Vietnam War veterans on the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam repatriation. The wonderful ceremony hosted at the National Veterans Memorial Museum will provide an opportunity to honor veteran war veterans and to honor those who lost their lives during the conflict. I commend the National Veterans Memorial Museum for their intentionality in the creation of a space for memorization and recognition and reflection of this anniversary, in addition to the year-round education provided at the museum. I thank the Vietnam War veterans, Captain Charlie Plumb, retired, a U.S. Navy veteran who will share his story and has shared his story of courage, experienced as a prisoner of war, and discuss his continued service to the United States of America as the keynote speaker. Thus, with sincere pleasure, I commend the Welcome Home celebration on the occasion of its 3rd anniversary, and I thank you for your dedicated commitment to the Vietnam War veterans. At 20 years old, I was jumping out of planes in Okinawa, because that was the first year where all of us we were sent to Okinawa. And I spent 19 months there. And to all of those that served on my behalf and took my place, certainly we honor you today, and certainly to my dear colleague, Senator Wilson. This is a bipartisan resolution. And I thought about the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. His mentor was Dr. Benjamin Elijah Mays, and he said this as I close: I only have a minute, only 60 seconds in it, forced upon me, can't refuse it. Didn't seek it, didn't choose it. But it's up to me to use it. I must suffer if I lose it. Give account if I abuse it. Just a tiny little minute, but eternity is in it. God bless you and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Senator. Always great to see you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Senators, and please pass along our gratitude to your colleagues in the Senate. The National Veterans Memorial and Museum is a membership organization, and we rely on the revenue we receive from our members, our friends, and donors to support our mission. At this point, would all of our members in the audience please stand so we can thank you for your membership and your support? Members, please stand. Thank you. Now, I would like to ask one of our members to remain standing, Bob. Bob Fry is an Army veteran who served in Vietnam. He is a Patriot Circle member of the museum. We asked Bob what his membership here means to him, and here's what he had to say. As a veteran of the Vietnam War and the Cold War, the National Veterans Memorial and Museum means so much to me as an institutional symbol of the service and sacrifice of our military's men and women since 1776. Sometimes maintaining our freedom requires a harsh toll of human sacrifice, but our country has endured throughout all. With its exhibits, its dedicated staff and volunteers, and valuable programs for veterans, this institution honors their service and educates younger generations about our military history while promoting a sense of hope and freedom for the future. Bob, thank you for all you do for us. We're much appreciated. If you are here and you are interested in becoming a member, or if you are a member and you would like to upgrade your membership, we have some great new information for you. Please see Maureen in the back, and we will be glad to take care of you. Now I would like to bring back Chaplain Thomas Whiteman to offer our benediction for the day. Chaplain?
If you can, will you stand with me as we close? And please receive this blessing. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and give you peace. May the Lord be gracious to you and turn his face towards you. And we pray, Lord, as always, give us peace. Amen.
Thank you, sir. Please be seated for a second. Just a final couple of notes. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in a round of applause for the fantastic 338th Army Band, our soloist, Mrs. Jocelyn George, and the color guard from the Ohio State University Army ROTC. Once again, we want to thank all of our sponsors. Your support makes ceremonies like this even more meaningful. If you would like to get a copy of Charlie's book, I'm No Hero, he will be signing books downstairs in Gallery 33. Just take the steps right there and down, and he will be glad to sign a book for you. And as you can imagine, this is a very busy day here at the museum, and we actually need to get this space ready for a luncheon in just a short while by the Ohio chapter of the Tuskegee Airmen. So we know you want to talk, but if you could move into the museum proper after this, that would help us get this space turned around for that luncheon.